Hey, somebody's got to eat the last pecan sandy. Oh, you did? Well, excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to the Professional Noticer.
Who is it this time, Commissioner? Joker, Egghead, Riddler, King Tut?
Here, you and I will use common sense and all the wisdom we can muster to move beyond what is true and go all the way to the truth.
Let's get this film down to the lab at Mrs. Mason's drugstore.
With actual listeners in more than 100 countries now, I am the Professional Noticer.
Places, please. Quiet down. And here we go. And roll camera.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week as the Professional Noticer. It's my job to professionally notice something for you, man. Nothing's off limits. No matter your questions, your interest, we have business, spiritual issues, popular culture. We even tackle odd conundrums like, is there anything you can hold without touching it at all? Yes, a conversation. Look, my purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life you would live if all your toughest questions were answered. Our sponsor this week is GulfCoastNation.com. Gulf Coast Nation, those guys, Adam Andrews and Dylan Weir, are just unbelievable. They are knocking it out of the park, and you need to go fishing with them. These guys are here on the Gulf Coast, and if you're headed for a family vacation, you definitely need to book a night with Adam and Dylan, shark fishing from the beach. They tag and release them, but you have pictures. If you can be part of their video show that they do, if you see Gulf Coast Nation on YouTube, there's a video that comes up every week. A couple of weeks ago, they had a client that broke their record. This client broke a previous client's record. It caught a 12-foot, 4-inch tiger shark. Landed it, tagged it, took pictures of it, released it right there on the beach. So think about that when you're swimming. They released a 1,000-pound shark right there on the beach. And then a couple of days ago, I know another client landed an over 8-foot hammerhead. And so, man, they have got it going on. And, when you go fishing with Gulf Coast Nation, nobody gets seasick. They're fishing from the beach. They've got these big array of rods and reels, and they're kayaking the baits out. And so there's nice chairs for mom. There's stuff to do for the kids. They keep small rods going so that the little kids can catch some stuff. And there's a lot to do. You want to have pizza delivered? They do it. You want to have hamburgers grilled or steaks grilled right there on the beach? It's an amazing evening. Go to GulfCoastNation.com. Check it out. But their season is booking up. So go ahead and get yourself on the list, GulfCoastNation.com, and check them out on the Facebook page and the Instagram and on YouTube, Gulf Coast Nation. Observations and answers. That's what we do here on the Professional Noticer. And today's show is going to be very unique because you're going to get observations, you're going to get answers, but I don't think any of them are going to be from me. I mean, I think that we have a guest today that you may not know this name, but I can almost guarantee that you will quickly be saying, have him back. I want to hear more from this guy. We have with us today Steve Woods. Steve is a solutions architect. I've known Steve for a few years now. One of the most interesting people that I have ever known. And I got to say this. When I say he's a solutions architect, a lot of people go, well, what the heck is that? Privately, I just call him a genius. Okay. Now, Steve's like glaring at me now. Don't call me that. But he is, see, I am technologically deficient. And as technologically deficient as I am, that's how over the top Steve is. He's worked in the White House. He's flown in airplanes listening to different languages, trying to discern which is coming from where, and done secret stuff for the government. And now he travels the world as a solutions architect. We'll get into what that is in just a minute. For now, please welcome Steve Wood. Steve, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Andy.
I as many conversations as you and I have had, I am always fascinated just by what you do. So explain to me first, what is a solutions architect?
That's what an architect is. As you come up through the ranks, you start as a developer. You write code all day,
Right.
and when you start becoming an architect, you're focused on the design. So you start designing architecture, and that's your focus. And developers would be working for you, implementing the design that you create.
See, I have tried to explain to several people what you do. And the way I always say, okay, so you know how I kind of know how to turn my computer on and write on it? And they say, yeah. And I say, you know how SB, she knows, like when my computer freezes up or something, she knows how to kind of fix it. Well, then there's people who know how to really fix computers. Then there's people who know how to build computers. Then there's people who know how to type numbers in and make pictures appear. And that is Steve. I mean, and so you are in a specific field.
Yes.
And so what is that field?
The field, they call it AppTX, and AppTX is simply stands for Applications Transformation or Applications Modernization. So we focus on its old systems and try to figure out how to make them new again. And it's a difficult problem because some of them are very, very old, 30 or 40 years old. Some of them are written in a language called COBOL, and it's a very difficult language to understand.
What is COBOL? And spell that for me.
COBOL.
Okay, I've heard of it.
Right. And it's one of the first languages that was geared toward businesses. It was created by a woman named Admiral Grace Hopper. And she wrote this language so that business people, her dream that business people would write the code. And she made it very verbose. And there's the problem. It's so verbose, there's millions and millions. Actually, there's billions in the world, there's billions of lines of COBOL. And these companies have this difficult time dealing with it because it's just so difficult to make any changes, and it's hard to be competitive with it.
Okay, so give me a... Now, here's another thing that I tell people about you. This is very curious to me about you. I tell people that there are people who can do this stuff, and then there's usually people who can explain this stuff to somebody like me. But these people are usually not the same people. That's because right. The people who build this stuff usually don't take showers and they don't they have like long fingernails and
there's a term in the industry, we call them propeller heads.
Okay, all right. But then there are people who actually can explain it and meet people and shake hands and smile
right.
and I always say Steve can do both. He does both. He takes showers. He's a good-looking guy. He can talk to you. And so explain to me, like when you say it's a real problem in the industry, how does that affect me? Explain it in a way that I would understand what somebody's going through.
Sure. Sometimes you might call up the bank and say, I want to change something about my account. And you say, call them up again later the same day. Say, I want to change something else. Well, you have to call back tomorrow because the change you made today isn't going to be reflected till they go through their batch cycle. At night, they run through these batch cycles.
What is a batch cycle?
It's basically the computer is eating up the data they typed in during the day.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with Batman.
No.
This is not
batch.
To the batch cycle. No,
batch cycle.
Batch. Okay,
That's
batch.
Right. And so what that does is it causes the business to have a circadian rhythm, basically a 24-hour cycle. And that's not good to be competitive. And there's a lot of younger companies who don't have COBOL that are being very competitive against larger companies who do have COBOL. COBOL runs on mainframes, extremely expensive to run mainframe computers. So it's very costly. Businesses are being pressured by their boards to get rid of the COBOL, but it's just so difficult to get rid of because it's just so big. So many millions and millions of lines of code.
All right, so one of the examples that I have never forgotten that you gave me one day, you gave me the example of changing your seat on an airline.
Right.
Because I was going to ask you, and I don't know if you would want to say, you say some of these companies are really hobbled by, some of these big older companies are hobbled by having COBOL.
Right.
All right. And it's like, and I guess big companies would be like airlines.
Right.
All right. And so explain what you explained to me about changing your seat, how it happens now and how it should be.
It should be easy, right? You just click on this and click on that, and
yeah. If I go and I say I'm in 14B, and I would like to change my seat to 17C.
Right. And they start typing. Right. You go up to the counter and they type and they type and they type and they type. And they're using a screen. This is called a green screen. If you turn the monitor around, you see it's just a black screen with a bunch of green type on it. And that's the mainframe interface that they're doing. And they have to memorize keys. It's just not easy. They have to type in commands. That's what they're doing, is typing in all these commands.
Yeah, because you would think, well, that should be like 2 clicks.
Yeah. Easily could be 2 clicks. And sometimes they might have a interface that makes it look like it's 2 clicks, and it'll do all the stuff on the back end. But the problem is the mainframes are driven by interfaces that are text-based interfaces, and there's a lot of typing and a lot of memorization of commands and different keys you have to hit. And sometimes I have to call their supervisor over because he knows the key you have to hit or the command you have to type in.
Right. Yeah. How many times have I had that?
Post-it notes on their screen sometimes.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
Right.
And so and I know all my questions are going to be stupid questions, but I know there's got to be somebody out there that's like me saying, well, why don't they change it? Why don't they? Why don't they change it like last week?
That's what we're working on. That's kind of my subspecialty, is working in applications transformation, but I actually build tools. So we write software to change the software. We write tools to help us understand other software, and it makes it easier for us to understand how it's put together. It's like giving us the ability to X-ray the code and understand it. We start using advanced technology. We use technology that's called social network analysis. Social network analysis is a science that's been around for many, many years. That's how they identified the 9/11 terrorists, because they saw how they.
Okay, wait, back up. Say, just talk a little slower. Tell me, how did they identify the 9/11 terrorist?
With a tool called social network analysis. It's basically, if I make a phone call to you, it's a dot, a line to another dot. You're a dot, I'm a dot. The phone call is a line. Now multiply that times thousands and thousands, if not millions of times, all the different phone calls, all the different emails, all the different relationships that we have. They look at they analyze the relationships of the 9/11 terrorists, and they found out these 20 guys seem to have something going on because they've made phone calls to each other, they've emailed each other, they're members of the same some group. So they realized these 20 guys are the guys we're looking for by using social network analysis. Well, we're doing the same thing with looking at source code. And it's actually kind of the same thing because people wrote source code. And John wrote source code back in the 1960s, and Sally was in the cubicle next to him, and she wrote something, they talked, and she wrote similar source code. So we're kind of still it's still human beings behind the code, and we're using network science or social network analysis to understand how those relationships evolved.
And so, you mentioned a little bit ago that now there's billions of lines of code. So, who? And I'm assuming that right now, the longer tenured the company, the bigger the company, the more mired they are.
Right.
Many
of the people who wrote the code are no longer around.
Wait. Say that again.
Many of the people who wrote the code, they wrote it back in the 60s. They've either retired or they're no longer alive. So
you can't even get anybody to explain what's there.
Right. And it takes so long. And nobody in the United States graduating with a computer science degree wants to go into coding COBOL. So we send a lot of the work to India. So now you have a 12-hour cycle separating between you and the people maintaining your code. So it gets worse and worse and worse.
Oh, my gosh.
So you need tools to help kind of get through the code and understand what it's doing. And that's kind of what I do, is write these tools.
How much is our government depending on this kind of stuff?
They depend on it quite a bit. The way you write COBOL, and back in those days, was a very arduous process, and it used a method called the waterfall methodology. It's like building a bridge. You have to make a lot of planning, a lot of meetings, a lot of design, a lot of cycles, and we changed that by putting them on a different. It's called extreme programming, so that they can. We did this for the Air Force. We taught them how they were releasing a new version of their software maybe once every 2 years. What we wanted to do is a new version every week. So we just changed.
Seriously.
The companies, even modern systems like written in Java as a language, it's a modern language, that's becoming to get a little long in the tooth as well. So we help people with mainframe systems and help people with written in a somewhat modern language, but it's still very, very old. Software is evolving so quickly. Companies are really trying to we call it technical debt. They're trying to lose this technical debt they have and pay down the technical debt so they can benefit from all these modern languages that are evolving. Open source has really changed the way that we think about software, and it's a different paradigm. It's a huge paradigm shift, and the people who are sitting on COBOL are relying on us to help them make that shift.
Now, I know, in a sense, I've known you, you have created several. I mean, you're a solutions architect. I have known when you have created several solutions that the industry just like went nuts over. Like, it's so. Give me a couple of examples of it, because there's one thing that I know that you did that was so groundbreaking. And I think if I'm getting this right, I think this was patented through HP.
Right.
And but it was so groundbreaking that Steve Forbes held a cocktail party on his yacht in New York Harbor for you.
It wasn't just for me, but it was for a lot of technologists. But I was one.
But you were the lead guy in the thing. And so what was that? I mean, see, boy, I'm showing my ignorance here because I can't even explain what you did.
The first question people have who have a lot of COBOL, they want to get off the COBOL, is how much is it going to cost?
Right.
Well, most of that you have to estimate with lines of code. And I know a lot of the code was kind of cut and paste to reuse it. I have a report here for this customer. I want to give it to that customer. I'll cut and paste 10,000 lines of code. So I knew there was a lot of duplicate source code. I wanted to find out how much. I wanted just one number. And it turns out that's a very, very difficult problem to solve.
Right.
And so I wrote some algorithms that would go through the code and find the duplicate code. And I used what's called heuristics, a couple of heuristics to make it go faster. And I was able to evaluate millions of lines of code in just a few minutes and find out all the duplicate code. So customers, this is refreshing to customers. They might say, well, I have 10 million lines of code, and I come in and run my tool. I say, well, actually 50% of it is duplicate. So it's half the size you think it is. And that's refreshing to customers because they're like, well, it's not as big, it's not going to cost as much. As long as you know where the duplicate source code is, you can mitigate that by not processing it over and over and over again.
So how much did you cut that time down? I mean, like if it would take somebody X amount of time to run it, to figure it out, how much were you able to cut that time down by what you invented?
The first time I ran the algorithm to find the duplicate code, it took 2 weeks. I think it was about 10,000 lines of code. And I wrote the two heuristics, and it took 5 seconds.
You turned 2 weeks into 5 seconds.
Right.
I'm looking at Matt now. I mean, that is...
And so that was what the basis of the patent was the two heuristics that I used. And also the basis of the patent was how do you visualize this duplicate source code? And that's where I use the social network analysis, the same tools we used.
Okay, what word are you using? Heuristics?
Heuristics.
What is that?
H-U-E-R-istics.
Okay. What is that?
Heuristic is a clever little thing you do. For instance, I found out, to actually find duplicate source code, you'd have to compare every line to every other line. That's called a Cartesian product. That's a whole lot of comparisons. So I would change the line into a number, and then I would count how many times that number occurred. And if it only occurred once, that's a poor place to start looking for a duplicate because it's completely unique. Turns out there's a lot of lines that only occur once. And that got it down pretty fast. But there's another heuristic I applied if it occurred too often. I started tweaking this. If it occurred too often, that's not a good place to start looking either. And that's how I got it down. Those two heuristics got the algorithm down from 2 weeks to a few seconds.
So companies, so there are a lot of companies that need this. And I suppose, I would compare this to like when some great gadget comes out, it costs $1,000. And then after it's been around and worked on and miniaturized and taken care of for a while, now everybody's getting them. They're $150 a piece.
Right.
And so I suppose when people started realizing they needed to have their code searched and changed and it's taken 2 weeks, and now you turn that 2 weeks into 5 seconds. Not only is it better, more accurate, it's less expensive for them too.
Right, exactly, and it gives them a place to start because literally these systems are so big they don't even know where to start. Some large financial companies, I was at one a few years ago that had 250 million lines of code. It was just unfathomable the number of lines of code, and they had no idea how it was put together. So you can find the duplicate code and use using these heuristics, and then use social network analysis to visualize it and see how it's put together.
Good grief! Hey, here is a term that I have heard you use before that I think is very interesting. The Woolsey-Swanson rule.
Woolsey-Swanson.
Explain that.
The Woolsey-Swanson rule is a term I use to explain why it's so difficult to implement changes in mainframe cultures. And it's really true of any kind of culture.
Yeah, because by the way, I think this is very curious because this has so many applications other than just technology. But keep going.
Yeah. It has a lot of, it's not just technology based, but it was actually created by a couple of mining engineers in Minnesota when they were trying to teach their students how to do this particular type of mathematics called operations research, solving really difficult problems with math. And they would always tell their students not to get too crazy and trying to design these really elaborate solutions, because he would say people would rather live with a problem they cannot solve than accept a solution they cannot understand. That's the Woolsey-Swanson.
Wow. Say that again.
People would rather live with a problem they cannot solve than accept a solution they cannot understand. That's true of so many different things.
So
right?
true.
Right. There might be some gadget, some camera, something out there that you will easily solve your problem, but you're not going to do it because you just don't understand it. Right.
That's why I still can't set my VCR.
That's right.
Which I know you're saying, Andy, we don't have VCRs anymore. But if we had one, I still couldn't set it.
Yeah, and that's I use that to explain a lot of the reasons why we have legacy systems in the first place. Is because there's probably solutions. We have some solutions that might be very helpful to you, but you're not going to use them unless you completely understand them. That's the reason we use a lot of visualization. Visualizations is very important. 40% of your brain is used to visualize. And there's some things only human beings can visualize. You ever go to change your email address, or they'll show you what's called a CAPTCHA, a bunch of letters all kind of twisted and turned, but you can read them, right? It might be a little difficult, but you can read them. Nothing else can. Only a human being. The CAPTCHA is a short expression for explaining a way of determining that you are a human being. So only human beings can read those.
And that's like those kind of puzzles where it's like, every third or fourth word and half of it's misspelled, but right. You can still read it.
Your brain can still read it. Your brain is a pretty amazing thing. It's called behavioral economics. And the kind of things that explains is very important. But I'm really big on building visualizations. Visualizations, when I would visualize the COBOL code, and printed out these really beautiful, they're called graphs, beautiful graphs. I would show it to the programmers who were maintaining the code, and they would jump up and go to the screen and start pointing at things. So I've always thought it looked like that. In my mind, I always thought the code looked like that. I've never seen it visualized that way.
Really?
It's very, very powerful. So when we first started going to talk to people about COBOL code, we'd sit down with a blank legal pad, and they wouldn't say anything. I would put together a workbook, 30 or 40-page workbook with some of these visualizations on it, and people would start talking about the code. It's like they're running up to look at the screen, and we couldn't shut them up. we had to digitally record the sessions because we didn't want to slow them down. They're talking about the source code. We want to know about the source code, and the visualizations helped them understand what they had in their head so they could talk about it more.
That's very interesting. I think who's going to be really interested in this episode is Dr. Barber MBA. You and Dr. Barber have to meet from ITAM, and she's one of the sponsors. But you guys have to get together at some point because you're probably the only two people on earth who can understand each other. I'm curious because you are personally such a well-rounded person. I sit and I listen to this, and I know that if this is the only thing that you could talk about, you and I would not be friends because I'm just like, my mind just goes, and I drift off somewhere else. But what, and I know some of your hobbies, and one of them, you're not just a cook, man, you're a chef. How has some of this thinking gotten into some of your hobbies and some of your passions? How has it affected that?
I think it makes me a lot more methodical about that. Right now, I'm getting a new smoker.
Right.
And I'm learning how to use an offset smoker. So I've probably ordered about 10 books on it in the last week or so. I like reading multiple points of view. So if I'm learning a new language, I would order several books because different people have different ways of explaining things. And the same thing with the smoker and learning how to use this offset smoker. I've probably got 5 or 6 different books I'm going to be consulting.
So what is an offset smoker? I'm just curious.
That's just where the firebox is not in the same chamber. Like a Weber grill, the fire is underneath, and it's really difficult to slow cook on that. An offset smoker, all the fire is in an offset box. So that only the smoke comes into the chamber.
Which is kind of like a real smokehouse.
A real smokehouse, right.
I'll be darned. It is funny listening to you because I sure seem to know. I know we've talked a lot, but I sure seem to know a lot about you personally, and I seem to know a lot of your stories. Why do you think I know so much about you?
Maybe because I'm married to your sister?
That must be it. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve is my brother-in-law. I am so proud of you. But I'm just going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever do business with me, and we're on the phone, and you think you can duke it out with me technologically, just remember that Steve might be quietly in the room slipping me notes, okay? Matt and I are laughing. We actually had that happen one time when we were, working on a thing, and it just kind of wasn't coming together, and I didn't know how to understand what they were doing or what they were saying or why it wasn't working, and so Steve just came over and sat in the room with me and said, ask him this, and right now, ask him this. And all of a sudden, these people are like, cause like, how does he even know to ask that? And so, man, you are a very interesting brother-in-law.
Well, so are you.
Thank you. I ate one of your rolls coming to the studio today, by the way.
Well, good.
Polly says that because you are so, Polly says she's not a good baker. She likes to cook, but she's not a good baker. She says because to be a good baker, you have to be precise. She says that's why Steve is a great baker. Yeah. We rely on Steve for the baked goods, these unbelievable rolls, and I know now, all this great stuff, and people are going to go, what's this recipe for rolls? You'll just have to wait. Just come to Thanksgiving with us or something. But where did you and Christy meet?
We met I was on a Y2K project in Foley, Alabama, working for Gulf Telephone. And she was a really busy businesswoman. And she went to Ruby Tuesdays for lunch. I went to Ruby Tuesdays for lunch. And after a few months of seeing her in Ruby Tuesdays, I finally asked her friend, who was the assistant manager, is she wearing a wedding ring? I said, no, it looks like a wedding ring. I said, why is she wearing that? I said, to keep people like you away from her.
To keep people like you away from
So
her.
long story short, we got married a few months later. My best man was the manager of Ruby Tuesdays, and her bridesmaid was the assistant manager.
I had a great time at that wedding, actually talking to your mother.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. Tell that story, Steve. I know that you will enjoy.
I first met Andy, went to his house. He asked me where I was from. I said, I'm from Hartselle, Alabama. And he corrected my pronunciation. He said, Steve, that's pronounced Hartselle. And I was like, I was as puzzled as, and we got in the car afterward. Your brother don't think I know how to pronounce the name of my own hometown. Fast forward.
I was just messing with him.
Fast forward
Hartselle.
6 months. At our wedding, he finally meets my mom. And see, Steve tells me you're from Hartselle. And my mom glared at me and said, you don't know how to pronounce the name of your own hometown, son. It's pronounced Hartselle.
Yeah, because cause I said, so you're from Hartselle. And she said, well, we pronounce it Hartselle. I said, really? That's curious because Steve pronounced it Hartselle. She just kind of looks at me. Oh,
6
my
months
gosh.
set up for a joke, right?
And I know a little bit about that Steve Forbes yacht trip because Christy got to go.
Yes, you did.
And so she's been to like Japan with you, to, Australia, all over the world. You guys have been, because you literally, there is no limit to where you work.
No. And when we get to do a lot of travel, hope to do that some more. Christy loves traveling. So she comes in with me on occasion.
And you get to live where, they let you, anybody you're doing anything for, they let you live wherever you want to live.
As long as you're near an airport, that's all.
Right.
And you have the internet, right?
And so, thankfully, you guys live in Orange Beach. So we get to see each other a lot. And man, I really appreciate you doing this. Now, before you go, I want to give us a glimpse of the future. What are you seeing that we don't know is on the horizon?
Computers are getting faster and faster. There's finally programming languages that can take advantage of that power. And you probably have heard of machine learning. Maybe you've heard of artificial intelligence.
Right.
Artificial intelligence is probably going to have the most impact. Machine learning and artificial intelligence are going to probably have the most impact going forward. I wish I was in my 20s again, because it's going to be like the Jetsons going forward, I think. It's going to be, look at Elon Musk. We were talking about him earlier. Look at SpaceX. Look at those spacesuits. It's phenomenal. He's a genius guy. He started out building batteries and wanted to sell more batteries, so he invents the electric car, right? He's an absolute genius. He's an example of where technology can take us, and he's going to take us quite far, and he's going to take us to Mars. But technology is behind everything now. Artificial intelligence is in your pocket. It's on your phone, and it's going to answer some very difficult problems. It's probably going to answer a lot of difficult problems in the field of medicine and all sorts of other sciences. So that's probably the biggest impact.
Is there anything happening now with the
I didn't get that.
well?
Could you try again?
Now, see, Steve, could you solve that for me? What the heck? I've got my phone.
I'm not sure I understand.
I don't want you to understand. I'm not talking to you. I'm trying to talk to Steve. Now, see, is this the kind of artificial intelligence I'm going to have to deal with?
I was at a conference, a very large conference. I got the front seat, and the keynote speaker came out and started speaking. And he said something into the microphone that apparently sounded like, "Hey, Siri." And my phone was inside my coat pocket, and she wakes up and starts doing that. And I had my phone maxed to the max. So in between speaking, he was like looking around, and he realized that's Siri. Somebody is using Siri while I'm giving my speech. And I was like,
Well, good. I'm glad that happened to you. I'm glad that happened to you. So if this, I guess, is my final question with the COVID-19 thing. How is this field of application modernization helping the medical research industry search for solutions to stuff like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. One of the things that is going on right now is they're using your cell phone technology. They're using that to trace contact tracing. So they're using this contact tracing to understand who you've been exposed to. So it's solving that problem in a very clever way. And there's probably going to be more and more of that. The other thing is, since we've had to stay at home, a lot of technology companies that were reluctant for us to work remotely on their source code realize my own employees are remote. Everybody's remote. So there's probably going to be a lot more working from home. It's probably not too good for the airline industry, but I think customers realize we don't really have to have our employees in for them to be productive. They're actually being quite productive on their own. And most people who work from home work more than 40 hours. They do it without even knowing about it, right?
Sure.
So your productivity actually is enhanced. And that's probably going to be one of the big lessons learned, is that we don't have to go into work to be productive.
There you go.
Yeah.
It probably won't matter to the airline industry. The government's been propping them up for years.
That's true.
So, good grief, Thank you so much.
I enjoyed it.
For being here. I am sure people are going to say, well, and I'll bet you anything, when we have you back, there's going to be a list of questions from our listeners. Just say, ask him this. What does he think about this? But I am very grateful for you personally. You are just awesome with my sister and with our family. My boys, Polly and I, and Austin and Adam just love you. You're Uncle Steve. In fact, Polly and I call you Uncle Steve because that's what the boys call you. And I really appreciate you sharing your time with our people today.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you, buddy. Steve, how can people reach you? I know people are going to have questions and just wanting to just kind of be in touch with you. How are you out there?
I'm on Facebook, and I'm also on LinkedIn.
Okay. It just Steve Woods?
Steve Woods. Right.
All right.
You might, Steve Woods will work. Right.
It will work? Is there something that would work better?
I actually work for a company called VMware, VMWARE. And so Google Steve Woods and VMware on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And you'll find me there.
All right. Hey, thank you so much, buddy. I appreciate it so much, you being here with us. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. Hey, quick question. Where do you seek wisdom? Allow us to suggest wisdomharbor.com. That's wisdom, H-A-R-B-O-U-R, harbor with an O-U-R. So go there now and you get a free 5-minute guided tour. Heck, you get a lot of time free, actually. There's docs that are open and available for you to go through right now and become a member of Wisdom Harbor. It's very inexpensive, and this is something you want to do for your family, your business, your schools. That's wisdomharbor.com. Okay? I am the professional noticer. Man, ladies and gentlemen, if you appreciate this podcast, we would appreciate you going to iTunes and giving us a nice review. You can only review a particular podcast on iTunes one time. And so if you haven't already, please make today your day. And I think that will do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, smile while you talk. Stay in your protective bubble as you go out into public, and make sure you have a positive answer to the question, how's it going? And so, until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Popcorn-flavored jelly beans provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by SatisfyingSounds.com. At SatisfyingSounds.com, we're up to our ears in research at finding and distributing those sounds that you just can't get enough of. What is it about the sound of a pull tab releasing the pressure inside a soda can? Or your computer coming online? That turning on sound that's just so satisfying to hear. Maybe you're more of a nature person and you like that crunch of walking in the snow, or waves landing on the beach, or the gentle pitter-patter of raindrops. Maybe those give you all those warm, fuzzy feelings. Maybe you're a bit more adventurous, a little stranger. Do you find yourself wasting bag after bag of oyster crackers on your shag carpet just to hear the sound of the vacuum cleaner crackle like a rain stick? Remember the rain stick you wanted as a child, but mom and dad wouldn't get it for you because those kind of instruments belong only in the outback, or played by tone-deaf hippies who never learned how to play the piano or carry a tune. So head on over to satisfyingsounds.com and peruse our library of over 150 million sound samples that are sure to make the hair stand straight up on the back of your neck. And hey, we have a sound for that too. That's satisfyingsounds.com.